Hey family, before we dive into today's story, I just want to say a quick something from the heart. I know the last story didn't hit home for some of you, and I truly apologize for that. As humans, we don't always get it right. But I'm here to do better. From now on, I promise you stories that will warm your heart, lift your spirit, and offer a sweet escape from life's daily hustle. So sit tight, relax, and let yourself feel every moment. And hey, don't forget to like this video and drop a comment with a popular slang from your corner of the world. And let me know what time you're watching this. Let's mark that attendance. Thank you. Now, let's begin. The glass and steel edifice of Lawson Tech commanded attention in the heart of the financial district, much like its CEO, Brian Lawson. At 34, Brian had built a reputation that preceded him through the corridors of power. His employees often joked in hushed tones that the temperature dropped several degrees whenever he entered a room. On this particular morning, Bianca James sat at her desk outside Brian's office, her fingers hovering over her keyboard as she heard his measured footsteps approaching. The click of his Italian leather shoes against the marble floor sent the usual ripple of tension through the office. Employees suddenly became engrossed in their work, backs straightening instinctively. Brian Lawson cut an imposing figure in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His angular features and steel gray eyes rarely betrayed emotion, and the slight crease between his brows seemed permanently etched there. As he passed through the office, his presence alone caused conversations to die mid-sentence. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson," Bianca managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. His response was a barely perceptible nod as he disappeared into his office. Jerry Matthews, Brian's childhood friend and company attorney, was the only one who remembered a different Brian. Over lunch in Brian's private dining room, Jerry often recalled their days at boarding school, where Brian had been known for his dry wit and rare but genuine smile. "You've become exactly what your father wanted," Jerry would say, not entirely as a compliment. 2 years ago, Brian's mother had orchestrated what she hoped would be the perfect match. Jessica Montgomery, daughter of a prominent family in their social circle. Jessica was everything the Lawson family could want, educated, refined, and from the right background. But Brian approached the relationship like another business acquisition. "I gave her everything she could want," Brian had told Jerry during one of their rare personal conversations. "The houses, the cars, the vacations, everything except yourself," Jerry had responded pointedly. Jessica's departure came in the form of a hand-delivered letter, her elegant handwriting stating what Brian had known but ignored. "You've given me the world, Brian, but never your time, never your heart." The letter now lay forgotten in his desk drawer, along with other failed attempts at personal connection. Meanwhile, Bianca's life was unraveling in a different way. Her mother's hospitalization had stretched the family's resources thin, and though her job as Brian's secretary paid well, it demanded every moment of her time. Her father's voice on the phone grew more distant with each missed family occasion. "I understand you're busy, sweetheart," he would say, the disappointment evident in his voice. "But your sister's wedding, that was important." Bianca would curl up on her couch after these calls, her roommate Shirley offering silent comfort. The weight of being the family's financial backbone while missing all the crucial moments wore heavily on her. The substantial hospital bills she paid couldn't make up for her empty chair at family gatherings. The current atmosphere at Lawson Tech was particularly tense as Brian pursued his biggest deal yet, Smith Energies. Thomas Smith, the 62-year-old CEO, was old school in every sense. He believed in handshakes over contracts, family values over profit margins, and most importantly, that a man's character was reflected in his personal life. Brian's pursuit of Smith Energies had become almost obsessive. The deal would not only expand Lawson Tech's reach, but would also finally prove to his father that he could surpass expectations. The morning meetings now started with updates on the Smith deal, and ended with Brian's increasingly irritated dismissals when progress wasn't fast enough. One morning, Bianca overheard Brian's conversation with Jerry about the upcoming Smith gala. Thomas Smith believes in the traditional family man, Jerry explained. He's turned down 3 potential deals this year because he didn't trust the CEO's character. One of them showed up to meetings without a wedding ring. Brian's response was a frustrated sigh. And I suppose showing up alone to his wife's birthday gala would send the wrong message? Precisely, Jerry confirmed. The Smiths value partnership in business and in life. That evening, as Bianca was preparing to leave, the intercom buzzed. Brian's voice, cool and commanding, filled her office. "Ms. James, I need to speak with you before you leave." Her heart sank. Her mother was being released from the hospital that weekend, and she had promised, finally, firmly promised, to be there. But as she entered Brian's office, the look in his eyes told her that her carefully laid plans were about to unravel. The sun was setting behind the city skyline, casting long shadows across Brian's minimalist office. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette sharp against the orange sky. Without turning, he spoke. "The Smith Gala this Saturday. You'll accompany me." It wasn't a request. Bianca felt her throat tighten. "Mr. Lawson, He turned then, his expression brooking no argument. "The car will pick you up at 7. Wear black. It's a masked event." Bianca stood frozen, years of conditioning preventing her from voicing her protest. Her mother's hopeful face flashed in her mind, along with her father's increasingly disappointed one. But looking at Brian's impassive expression, she knew that explaining would be futile. This was the man who had fired an executive for missing a meeting due to his child's graduation. Personal matters held no weight in Brian Lawson's world. Later that night, in the apartment she shared with Shirley, Bianca broke down. "I can't miss Mom's homecoming," she sobbed. "Dad will never forgive me, but if I don't go to this gala..." Shirley held her friend, understanding the impossible position she was in. The weight of family obligations crashed against the steel wall of professional demands, and Bianca was caught in between. What neither woman knew then was that this conflict would set in motion a chain of events that would crack the carefully constructed facade of Brian Lawson's world, transforming not just his life but everyone's around him. But for now, in that small apartment, Bianca could only see the impossible choice before her, unaware that sometimes the most desperate situations lead to the most unexpected solutions. The story of Brian Lawson, the feared CEO, and his failed relationship with Jessica was well known in certain circles. But what nobody knew was that beneath his cold exterior lay a man who had never learned how to bridge the gap between success and happiness, between achievement and fulfillment. As he stood in his penthouse that evening, looking out over the city he helped shape, even he didn't realize that his carefully ordered world was about to be turned upside down by a simple masquerade, and a woman who would teach him that some things can't be controlled, managed, or acquired. They have to be earned through vulnerability and genuine connection. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars through the apartment window as Bianca paced back and forth, her reflection multiplying in the glass panes. Shirley sat cross-legged on their well-worn couch, watching her friend wear a path in their carpet. The remnants of their hastily ordered Chinese takeout lay forgotten on the coffee table. "I can't believe this is happening." Bianca's voice cracked with emotion. 8 months, Shirley. 8 months Mom has been in that hospital, and the one day, I promised I'd be there. She trailed off, collapsing onto the couch beside her friend. Shirley reached out, squeezing Bianca's hand. "Tell him you can't go. Simple as that." A hollow laugh escaped Bianca's lips. "Simple? Have you met Brian Lawson? The man who made Johnson from accounting cry because his quarterly report had a typo?" She pulled out her phone, showing Shirley the text she'd received an hour after Brian's command. "The dress will be delivered tomorrow. Black, floor, length. No exceptions." "God, he really is a piece of work," Shirley muttered, taking the phone. "Who does he think he is, dictating what you wear?" "A man who signs my paychecks," Bianca replied wearily. the paychecks that have been paying Mom's hospital bills. She reached for her tea, now cold and forgotten. Dad called earlier. They're planning a small welcome party. Sarah's flying in from Chicago. Even Tommy's taking time off from med school. Her voice broke. The whole family will be there, except me. Again. The weight of missed moments hung heavy in the air. Her father's birthday dinner, where her empty chair had stood as a silent accusation. Her sister Sarah's wedding, where she'd only managed to catch the last hour of the reception, still in her work clothes. The countless hospital visits delegated to quick FaceTime calls between meetings. Your family understands you're working hard to help them, Shirley offered gently. Do they? Bianca's eyes welled up. Because lately all I see in Dad's eyes is disappointment. And Mom, she tries to hide it, but I know she's hurt. Money isn't everything, Cheryl. They need me there, not just my bank account. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind only years of friendship could create. They'd known each other since high school, the quiet, studious Shirley, and the vibrant, ambitious Bianca. Life had somewhat reversed their roles now, with Shirley becoming more outspoken as a lawyer while Bianca learned to temper her spirit under Brian's demanding leadership. You know what's ironic? Bianca said suddenly, wiping her eyes. It's a masked party. He won't even see whoever's there with him. It's just about having someone on his arm, looking pretty for the cameras and the Smiths. Something shifted in the air at those words. Shirley sat up straighter, her legal mind clicking into gear. A masked party? Yeah, some fancy theme Mrs. Smith wanted. All black everything, faces covered. Bianca gestured vaguely. Probably so the rich and powerful can pretend to be mysterious for one night. Shirley stood up, walking to their shared closet. She pulled out one of Bianca's dresses, a simple blue sheath that they often borrowed from each other. Remember last month when I wore this to court? That junior partner thought I was you until I started speaking. Bianca followed her friend's train of thought, her eyes widening. Shirley, no, that's crazy. Is it? Shirley turned to face her friend. We're the same height, same build, similar complexion, with a mask on. She let the possibility hang in the air. You want to impersonate me at the gala? Bianca's voice rose an octave. With Brian Lawson? The man who, by your own admission, barely looks at you? Who probably couldn't tell you the color of your eyes if his life depended on it. Shirley pressed. You said it yourself. It's just about having someone there, looking pretty and playing the part. Bianca stood up, pacing again. This is insane. If he finds out, how would he? It's a masked party, Bi. Everyone will be focused on looking mysterious and important. Shirley followed her friend. And you'll be where you need to be, with your family. The idea, wild as it was, took root. They spent the next hour discussing the possibilities, the risks, the details that would need to be covered. Bianca found herself remembering all the little things about working with Brian Bianca. His preference for coffee, black, no sugar. His habit of checking his phone every 20 minutes during events. His tendency to stand slightly apart from crowds. The next day, the dress arrived as promised. It was a masterpiece of black silk and subtle beading, with a matching mask that would cover the upper half of the face. When Shirley tried it on, even Bianca gasped. It fits you perfectly, she whispered, circling her friend. Even better than it would have fit me. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Shirley memorized key details about Lawson Tech, about Brian's current projects, about the Smith deal. Bianca coached her on how to carry herself, how to respond to Brian's curt commands, how to blend into the background while remaining presentable. He never makes small talk, Bianca explained, watching Shirley practice walking in the heels that came with the dress. If he speaks to you, it's usually to give instructions or to remind you of something important. Sounds delightful, Shirley muttered, mastering the smooth glide that Bianca had perfected over years of corporate events. The night before the gala, they sat in their living room, going over final details. Bianca's flight to her hometown was booked for early morning. She'd arrive just in time for her mother's homecoming, while Shirley would prepare for the evening's masquerade. "Remember," Bianca said, clutching her friend's hands, "he always stands on the left side in photos. He drinks exactly 2 glasses of scotch at events. Never more, never less. And if anyone asks about work, I deflect to him or keep it vague," Shirley finished. "I've got this, bye. Go be with your family." The morning of the gala arrived crisp and clear. Bianca left at dawn, her heart torn between gratitude and anxiety. As her plane took off, Shirley began her transformation. Hours of preparation culminated in a vision in black silk, the mask adding an air of mystery that would prove to be their salvation. The text came exactly as Bianca said it would. Car arriving in 20 minutes. Shirley took a final look in the mirror, seeing both herself and her friend reflected back. The plan seemed simultaneously brilliant and insane, but there was no turning back now. As she stepped into the sleek black car that would take her to Brian's mansion, Shirley felt a flutter of nervousness. She was about to spend an evening pretending to be someone else, alongside one of the most intimidating men in the business world. But then she remembered why they were doing this. The image of Bianca's tears, the thought of her friend finally being able to be there for her family. Meanwhile, in a small suburban home across the city, preparations of a different kind were underway. Bianca's family was getting ready to welcome their mother home, unaware of the elaborate deception taking place to make their daughter's presence possible. Back in the city, Brian Lawson stood in his penthouse, adjusting his bow tie with practiced precision. The mask lay on his dresser, a simple but elegant piece that would soon hide his features from the world. He thought about the evening ahead, about the Smiths, about the deal that could change everything. Not once did he think about the woman who would be accompanying him, the woman who wasn't who she appeared to be. The stage was set for a night that would alter the course of multiple lives, though none of the players yet realized just how profound those changes would be. As Shirley settled into the car, her heart racing beneath the elegant gown, she couldn't help but wonder if they had just made a terrible mistake or set in motion something extraordinary. The deception was complete. The switch had been made, and in the gathering dusk of that fateful Saturday, 2 separate events were about to unfold. One of family reunion and healing, the other of masks and hidden truths. What no one could predict was how these parallel stories would eventually intertwine, creating a tapestry of coincidence and fate that would change everything. The sunset painted the city skyline in hues of amber and rose as Brian's Mercedes glided through the evening traffic. Shirley sat beside him, her heart thrumming beneath the exquisite black silk. The mask, though lightweight, felt heavy with the weight of deception. Brian hadn't spared her more than a cursory glance when he entered the car, his attention fixed on his tablet, exactly as Bianca had predicted. "The Smiths are traditional," Brian's voice cut through the silence, still focused on his screen. "When we arrive, stay close but not clingy. Sophisticated, not desperate." His tone was clipped, professional, as if delivering a business brief rather than instructions to a date. "Of course, Mr. Lawson," Shirley responded softly, mimicking Bianca's usual deference. The city lights played across the mask's surface as she turned to study his profile. In the dim car interior, she could see what Bianca meant about his features. Handsome, but hard, like marble carved by years of ambition and expectation. The Smith mansion emerged from the darkness like a glowing beacon, its grounds transformed into an enchanted garden. Crystal lights twinkled in the trees, and black-clad figures moved like elegant shadows across the illuminated landscape. Camera flashes punctuated the night as they pulled up to the entrance. Brian stepped out first, his movements precise and practiced. He extended his hand to Shirley, not out of gentlemanly instinct but calculated appearance. As she emerged from the car, the gathered photographers burst into a frenzy of clicks and flashes. Shirley felt Brian's hand settle at the small of her back, guiding her forward with firm pressure. "Smile," he murmured, though his own expression barely shifted from its usual stern set. The masks created an air of mystery that the photographers seemed to devour, their cameras capturing the striking image they presented. The powerful CEO and his elegant companion, wrapped in shadow and secrets. Inside, the mansion was a symphony of black and gold. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the masked crowd, creating an atmosphere both intimate and theatrical. Classical music floated through the air, accompanied by the gentle murmur of society's elite, engaging in carefully crafted conversations. "I need to find Thomas Smith," Brian said, his eyes scanning the crowd through his mask. "Stay visible but occupied. We need to appear." He paused, searching for the right word. "Compatible?" Shirley supplied, a hint of irony in her voice that made him glance at her sharply. Before he could respond, a wave of movement rippled through the crowd as Grace Smith, the evening's hostess, made her entrance. She was a vision in black lace, her mask adorned with delicate pearls that caught the light as she moved. Brian straightened, clearly preparing to make his way toward her, but Shirley had already caught Grace's eye. Perhaps it was the lawyer in her, trained to read people and situations, but she saw an opportunity in the way Grace's gaze lingered on their pair. "Mrs. Smith," Shirley called out warmly, her voice carrying just enough to be heard without seeming eager. "That mask is absolutely divine. The pearls catch the light perfectly." Grace Smith paused, pleased by the observation. "My dear, how kind of you to notice. Most people have been too busy trying to guess who's behind these masks to appreciate their artistry." Shirley moved forward, drawing Brian along with natural grace. "The mystery is half the fun, isn't it? Though I imagine choosing the perfect mask for one's own birthday celebration must have been quite the task." Grace laughed, a genuine sound that drew attention from nearby guests. "Oh, you have no idea. My husband thought I was mad, spending weeks selecting just the right one." "Not mad at all," Shirley responded, her legal training allowing her to read the opening. "The right mask, like the right partner, can transform an entire evening." Brian's hand tightened slightly on her waist, but Shirley continued smoothly. "Speaking of partners, Mr. Lawson was just telling me how honored we are to be part of your celebration." Grace's attention shifted to Brian, who smoothly stepped into the conversation. Shirley watched as he navigated the social waters with practiced skill, but she noticed how Grace's eyes kept returning to her, intrigued by this mysterious woman who had caught her attention. As the evening progressed, Shirley found herself drawn into Grace's inner circle. Her natural wit and charm, unconstrained by Bianca's usual fear of Brian, allowed her to shine. She discussed art with Grace's friends, debated current events with visiting diplomats, and even made the typically stoic Thomas Smith laugh with a cleverly worded observation about modern technology. Brian observed all this with growing interest. His date, whom he had expected to remain decoratively invisible, was somehow managing to command attention while making it seem effortless. When Thomas Smith finally engaged him in conversation about the potential deal, Brian realized it was largely due to his wife's enthusiastic endorsement of "that charming young woman you brought." The music shifted to something slower, more intimate. Couples moved to the dance floor, their masked faces creating an atmosphere of romance and mystery. Brian found himself leading Shirley to join them, his hand fitting perfectly against her waist as they began to move to the music. "You've surprised me," he said quietly, his voice holding a note she hadn't heard before. "I didn't expect. Someone who could think for themselves?" Shirley couldn't resist the slight challenge in her tone. His steps faltered almost imperceptibly. Someone who understood the game so well. They danced in silence for a moment, the music wrapping around them like silk. Shirley felt his grip tighten slightly, felt the way his breath caught when she turned her face up to his. "Perhaps," she said softly, "you've been playing the wrong game all along." The evening wound down like a beautiful dream. As they prepared to leave, Grace Smith insisted on hugging Shirley goodbye, whispering, "You must come for tea next week, dear, both of you." In the car ride back to her apartment, Brian was quieter than usual, his tablet forgotten in his lap. As they pulled up to her building, he finally spoke. "Thank you for tonight. And tell Ms. James to report to my office first thing Monday morning." His voice was controlled, but there was something else there. Amusement, perhaps. Or appreciation. Shirley's heart stopped for a moment. He knew. He had known all along. Yet he had played along, had allowed the charade to continue. As she stepped out of the car, she caught his reflection in the window, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The car pulled away, leaving Shirley standing in the cool night air, her mind racing with the implications of what had just occurred. Her phone buzzed with messages from Bianca, but for a moment, she just stood there, remembering the feel of his hand on her waist, the way his eyes had followed her throughout the evening, the subtle shifts in his usually impenetrable facade. Something had changed tonight, not just for Bianca or for Brian, but for everyone involved. As Shirley finally turned to enter her building, she couldn't help but wonder what Monday would bring, and why the thought of Brian Lawson's almost smile made her heart beat just a little faster. The Monday morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lawson Tech, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Bianca sat at her desk, her fingers nervously tapping against her keyboard. She had arrived an hour early, her mind racing with possibilities of how this confrontation would play out. The weekend's memories of her mother's joyful homecoming now seemed distant as anxiety gnawed at her stomach. The elevator dinged, and Brian's measured footsteps echoed through the quiet office. Bianca straightened, her heart thundering in her chest. He passed her desk without acknowledgement, disappearing into his office. Moments later, his voice came through the intercom. "Come in, Ms. James." Brian stood by the window, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. The morning light silhouetted his tall frame, making him appear more imposing than usual. Bianca closed the door softly behind her, waiting. "You tried to deceive me," he said quietly, still facing the window. His tone wasn't angry. If anything, it held a note of something else, something Bianca couldn't quite identify. "Mr. Lawson, I can explain," she began, her carefully prepared speech dissolving in her throat. "My mother was coming home from the hospital, and I—" "What's her name?" Brian interrupted, finally turning to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held an intensity that made Bianca pause. "I'm sorry?" "Your friend," he clarified, moving to sit behind his desk. "The one who attended the gala in your place. What's her name?" Bianca hesitated, protective instincts warring with the need for honesty. "Shirley," she finally said. "Shirley Peters." Brian repeated the name softly, almost to himself. "She's a lawyer?" "Yes, sir. She works at Morrison." "Right." He nodded slowly, his fingers drumming once on his desk, a rare display of restlessness from the usually composed CEO. "You're not fired, Miss James," he said after a moment, causing Bianca to release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Your work has been exemplary, and I understand the position I put you in." The admission stunned Bianca more than if he had fired her. Brian Lawson, acknowledging he might have been wrong about something. She wondered if she had stepped into an alternate universe. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," she managed. "That will be all." He dismissed her, already turning to his computer. But as Bianca reached the door, he spoke again. "And Ms. James, your mother, I hope she's doing well." The rest of the week passed in a blur of unusual occurrences. Brian seemed distracted, something that had never happened before. He would stare out his window for long periods, his usual laser focus on work somewhat dimmed. Twice, Bianca caught him looking at Morrison, Wright's website. On Thursday evening, as Bianca was preparing to leave, his mother called. Brian's voice carried through the partially open door as he spoke to her. "No, Mother, I don't need you to set me up with Elena. Yes, I remember her from high school. No, I'm not still holding a grudge about the chemistry lab incident. Mother, please." There was a long pause, followed by a heavy sigh. "The family weekend? Yes, I remember it's in 3 weeks. No, I won't be coming alone. Yes, I promise I'll bring someone. Mother, I have to go. The following morning, Brian called Bianca into his office again. He was standing by his window, as usual, but there was something different about his posture. A slight tension that hadn't been there before. I need a date for the annual Lawson family weekend, he stated without preamble. It's a tradition that goes back generations. 3 days at the family estate in the Hamptons. Bianca nodded, already reaching for her tablet to start making arrangements. I want you to ask Ms. Peters if she's available. Bianca's tablet clattered to the floor. I'm sorry, what? Shirley Peters, he clarified, as if she might have forgotten her best friend's name. Tell her I'm willing to compensate her generously for her time. Later that evening, in their apartment, Bianca relayed the conversation to Shirley, who was curled up on their couch in comfortable loungewear, case files spread around her. He wants to pay me to be his date? Shirley's eyebrows rose. Like some sort of escort service? Well, when you put it that way, Bianca grimaced. He's not great with people, or emotions, or anything that isn't business, really. Shirley closed her case file, her expression thoughtful. Tell him I said no. What? But Shirl? And, Shirley continued, a small smile playing at her lips. Tell him that if he wants me to be his date, he needs to ask me properly. Bianca stared at her friend in disbelief. You want Brian Lawson, the man who makes Fortune 500 CEOs nervous, to ask you out like a normal person? Exactly. Sorry to cut in, but I noticed 90% of our viewers watch our stories till the end, but eventually forget to subscribe. Please, if you're enjoying our story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps our stories get recommended to more hearts across the globe. Thank you. Now, back to our story. The next few days were filled with Bianca trying to avoid Brian's questioning looks while he struggled with his pride. She watched as he paced his office, making calls to his usual suppliers, jewelry stores, luxury boutiques, florists. One afternoon, a delivery arrived at Morrison Wright. The receptionist wheeled in a cart, laden with an enormous arrangement of roses, a Cartier box, and a "Will you be my date?" card with Brian's phone number elegantly printed on the back. Shirley took one look at it and sent it all back. Brian's reaction when he learned of the rejection was a study in conflicting emotions. He laughed, but it was a sound of disbelief rather than amusement. What does she mean, no? He demanded of Bianca. Did you tell her about the compensation? She's not interested in compensation, Mr. Lawson, Bianca replied carefully. She's interested in authenticity. The word seemed to stop him short. He stood by his window, hands in his pockets, contemplating the city below. For the first time in years, he found himself truly puzzled by another person. The women in his social circle had always been predictable, too interested in his wealth, his status, his connections. But Shirley Peters had managed to surprise him twice now. Finally, after a week of internal struggle, Brian made his way to Morrison Wright. The receptionist informed him that Ms. Peters was in a meeting with clients. He waited, the great Brian Lawson, sitting in a visitor's chair like any other person, for almost an hour. When Shirley finally emerged from her conference room, she found him there, his usual imposing presence somewhat softened by the humility of waiting. Their eyes met across the reception area, and for a moment, neither spoke. Would you like to have dinner with me? He asked simply, no pretense, no grand gestures. Just a question, asked with an unfamiliar vulnerability in his voice. Shirley studied him for a moment, noting the slight uncertainty in his usually confident stance. Yes, she said finally, I would like that. The smile that crossed his face then was small but genuine, perhaps the first real smile he'd shown in years. As he left the office, his step lighter than usual, Shirley couldn't help but think that sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in the simplest packages. That evening, as Brian sat in his penthouse office, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, thinking about someone else's feelings. He remembered how Shirley had moved through the gala with natural grace, how she had made Grace Smith laugh, how she had challenged him with that slight touch of defiance in her voice while they danced. His phone buzzed with another call from his mother, but for once, he didn't feel the usual irritation. Instead, he found himself looking forward to introducing Shirley to his family, not as a prop or a business arrangement, but as someone who had somehow managed to make him question everything he thought he knew about relationships. The next morning, when he arrived at the office, his employees noticed something different. The usual chill that accompanied his presence was somewhat tempered. When Johnson from accounting stumbled through his morning report, Brian didn't immediately dismiss him. Instead, he asked questions, showed patience. Bianca, watching from her desk, couldn't help but smile. She had known Shirley since high school, had watched her friend grow into a formidable lawyer who never compromised her principles. Now she was watching Brian Lawson, the man everyone feared, learning perhaps the most important lesson of his life, that real connections couldn't be bought, only earned. As she watched him prepare for his upcoming date with Shirley, Bianca realized that sometimes the best matches are made not through careful planning or social engineering, but through the unexpected turns of fate that force us to see ourselves and others in a completely new light. The transformation of Brian Lawson had begun, not with a bang but with a whisper, not with a business deal but with a simple mask at a gala, and not with wealth or power, but with the humility to ask for what he wanted, plainly and honestly, for perhaps the first time in his life. The weekend of the Lawson family dinner arrived sooner than expected. Brian found himself standing outside Shirley's apartment building on a crisp Friday evening, something unfamiliar fluttering in his chest. For the first time in years, he had chosen to drive himself rather than send his chauffeur. When Shirley opened her door, time seemed to pause. She wore a deep blue evening dress that caught the light like captured starlight. Brian, usually so composed, felt his carefully maintained facade crack slightly. His breath caught, and for a moment, words failed him. "You look," he started, then stopped, searching for words that wouldn't sound like a business assessment. Shirley smiled, understanding the struggle behind his hesitation. "Thank you," she said simply, saving him from his uncharacteristic speechlessness. "You look very handsome yourself." The drive to the Lawson family estate was filled with a comfortable silence, occasionally broken by easy conversation. Brian found himself sharing stories about his childhood, about the family traditions that shaped him, things he'd never felt compelled to share before. "My great-grandfather started these family weekends," he explained, his eyes on the road but his mind clearly elsewhere. He believed that success meant nothing without family to share it with. Ironic, considering how I've approached life so far. The self-awareness in his voice made Shirley turn to study his profile. "We all grow into ourselves at different paces," she offered gently. The Lawson estate emerged from the darkness like a painting come to life. Warm lights spilled from every window, and the manicured gardens seemed to glow in the evening light. As they pulled up to the entrance, Brian surprised both of them by reaching for Shirley's hand. "I should warn you," he said, his thumb unconsciously tracing circles on her palm. "My mother can be intense." Inside, the Lawson family gathered in the grand living room. Elizabeth Lawson, Brian's mother, stood as they entered. Her keen eyes took in their joined hands, the slight softness in her son's usually stern expression, the natural way Shirley fit against his side. "Brian, darling." Elizabeth moved forward, embracing her son before turning to Shirley. "And you must be Shirley. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which, knowing my son, means you must be special indeed." The evening unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony, but with unexpected variations that made it uniquely beautiful. Shirley engaged Brian's father in a passionate discussion about recent changes in corporate law, her intelligence and insight earning Robert Lawson's grudging respect. She shared family recipes with Elizabeth, who was delighted to find someone who understood the importance of tradition while embracing modern twists. But it was Brian's sister, Catherine, who provided the most surprising moment of the evening. Known for her reserve, Catherine had barely spoken during dinner, watching Shirley with careful consideration. Later, as they gathered in the library for after-dinner drinks, Shirley made a quiet observation about the first edition Austen on display that caused Catherine to burst into unexpected laughter. "Finally," Catherine declared, "someone who can appreciate both Austen and corporate law. Do you know, Brian hasn't smiled this much at a family dinner since he was 12? Brian, who had been watching Shirley throughout the evening, didn't deny it. Instead, he found himself drawn into conversations that had nothing to do with business or success. He listened as Shirley shared stories about her own family, about the cases she was passionate about her dreams and aspirations. "You're different with her," Elizabeth observed quietly, catching a private moment with her son. "More like the boy I remember, before you decided you had to be perfect all the time." Brian watched as Shirley charmed his father with her knowledge of vintage wines. "She doesn't expect perfection," he replied softly. "She expects authenticity." The weekend passed in a blur of moments that seemed to crack Brian's carefully constructed walls. Shirley beat him at chess, challenging his strategies with unexpected moves that made him rethink his approach. They walked in the gardens, where he found himself sharing memories of hiding among the roses as a child, dreaming of adventures before responsibility became his constant companion. During a quiet moment on Saturday afternoon, they found themselves alone in the library. Shirley was examining the family photographs on the walls when Brian spoke. "I've never brought anyone here who felt right," he admitted, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Even with Jessica, it was always about meeting expectations, playing a role." Shirley turned to face him, her eyes soft with understanding. "And what role are you playing now?" "None," he realized, the truth of it surprising him. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm just being." The weeks following the family weekend brought subtle but significant changes. At work, employees began to notice differences in their feared CEO. He still demanded excellence, but there was a new dimension to his leadership. He listened more, considered perspectives he might have dismissed before. Bianca noticed how he started taking actual lunch breaks, sometimes meeting Shirley at small cafes where they could talk without the weight of their professional personas. She watched as he learned to laugh again, to show genuine interest in others' lives, to be present in moments rather than always planning for the next achievement. Their relationship deepened naturally, like a river finding its true course. They challenged each other intellectually, supported each other's ambitions, and slowly learned the dance of partnership rather than power plays. One evening, after a particularly challenging case had kept Shirley working late, she found Brian waiting outside her office building. Without a word, he led her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. "I remembered you mentioning this was your favorite," he said as they were seated in a cozy corner booth. "The owner's grandmother still makes the sauce fresh every morning." Shirley looked at him in surprise. "You remembered that? I mentioned it once, months ago." "I remember everything you say," he admitted, his voice carrying a vulnerability that would have been unthinkable a few months ago. "You make me want to pay attention to the details I used to think were unimportant." Over plates of handmade pasta and glasses of rich red wine, they talked about everything and nothing. Brian found himself sharing his fears about never living up to his father's legacy, about using success as a shield against genuine connection. Shirley spoke about her own struggles with balancing ambition and authenticity, about learning to stand firm in her principles even when it would be easier to bend. "You know," she said, twirling pasta on her fork, "the first time I met you, really met you, not at the gala, I thought you were exactly what everyone said, cold, unapproachable, focused only on power." "And now?" he asked. his heart beating faster despite himself. Now I see someone who's learning that true strength isn't about being feared, but about being genuine. Someone who's discovering that vulnerability isn't weakness. The candlelight caught the warmth in her eyes, and Brian felt something shift inside him, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. "I've never felt this way before," he admitted, the words coming easier than he expected. "With Jessica, with anyone, it was always about maintaining appearances. But with you, I find myself wanting to be better, wanting to be present. You make me want to be more than just the CEO everyone fears." Shirley reached across the table, taking his hand. "I fell for the man behind the mask, Brian. Not the ruthless CEO, but the person who finally learned to ask properly for what he wants, who shows up and stays present, who's learning to let someone in." Their first real kiss came naturally, there in the warm light of the small Italian restaurant. It wasn't planned or perfect. It was honest and tender, much like their relationship had become. In that moment, both realized they had found something rare, a love based on mutual respect, understanding, and genuine connection. The changes in Brian became more noticeable at work. While he maintained his professional standards, employees began to see different sides of him. He implemented a mentorship program, remembering how Jerry had been his only real guide through the years. He started taking time to explain his decisions, to teach rather than just demand. Bianca, watching this transformation, couldn't help but smile at the irony. Her desperate plan to attend her mother's homecoming had led to something none of them could have predicted: the humanizing of Brian Lawson. 6 months after their first real date, Brian planned a private dinner at his penthouse. The city lights sparkled below them like earthbound stars as he led Shirley to the balcony. The table was set simply but elegantly, with candles flickering in the evening breeze. "I've been thinking," he said, pouring wine into crystal glasses, "about masks and pretenses, about the roles we play and the people we really are." Shirley watched him, sensing the importance of the moment. "And what have you concluded?" "That sometimes the best things in life come from dropping the mask completely." He moved around the table, taking her hands in his. "You saw through every wall I built, every defense I constructed. You didn't want the CEO, the Lawson heir, or the powerful businessman. You wanted me to be real, to be genuine, to be just Brian." She finished softly. He nodded, dropping to one knee in a move that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "And just Brian is asking if you would do him the honor of becoming his wife. Not for business advantages or social connections, but because I love you, simply and completely." The ring he presented wasn't the ostentatious piece his position might have demanded. Instead, it was elegant and meaningful. A vintage piece he had found that reminded him of the first edition books they had discussed in his family's library. Shirley's yes was followed by a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. One built on authenticity rather than appearance, on love rather than leverage. Their engagement made headlines in the business world, but not for the reasons one might expect. The story that captured public attention wasn't about power couples or merged interests. It was about transformation, about how the feared CEO of Lawson Tech had learned to smile again, about how love had transformed not just a man, but an entire corporate culture. The greatest testament to this change came from an unexpected source. Johnson from accounting, speaking at their engagement party, raised his glass with slightly shaking hands but a firm voice. "To the couple who proved that behind every mask, there's a person waiting to be seen. And to Mr. Lawson, who taught us that true leadership isn't about being feared, it's about being authentic." Brian, holding Shirley's hand, felt the truth of those words deep in his soul. He had spent years building walls, maintaining appearances, and measuring success in profits and power. But his greatest achievement, he now knew, was learning to be vulnerable, to be genuine, to love and be loved in return. Their love story became known not as one of a ruthless CEO being tamed, but of two strong individuals who helped each other grow, proving that sometimes the best relationships come from unexpected beginnings and the courage to be vulnerable. In the end, it wasn't about masks or pretenses. It was about two people who found in each other the courage to be authentically themselves.